Guess who?
Well, you don't have your mask on, so it's easy.
That's right, man. You know,
Keith Jones in the house.
yeah, man. You know, one thing that's been interesting, man, is like, I started taking psychology classes a couple years ago and got my, undergrad degree in that. But what it talks about is as human beings, man, we're often, and this would be a great segue into our topic, that if part of a image is obstructed, that our brain automatically fills out the other side of it. So like if you see half my face, you automatically fill out, the other side of it. Like you automatically do that. You fill out the other half of it that you can't see. And so what's been happening with masking is I have this idea when people are masked, like what they look like. And then they move the mask. I'm like, oh, that's not quite what I thought. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, everyone's beautiful to me. But I thought the nose or the mouth or the jawline would be shaped differently. And I think that's what, a segue into that is that, in terms of threats or whatnot, our mind is always like filling things out. And because, as you mentioned in another podcast, that we have a negative bias, we're often always creating enemies out of people and situations. And so I thought we'd do a podcast called "There Are No External Enemies." What do you think?
Wow. Yeah, let's roll. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a movie, and I encourage everyone to find a little 4-minute YouTube clip on the movie Revolver that starred Jason Statham and Andre 3000. This was years ago that they did this film. And at the end of it, you have these spiritual leaders and psychologists, psychiatrists that are pretty renowned. And they're talking about the ego and how it creates these external enemies. And it feeds off of it, and that's what strengthens the ego. And I've learned that whenever I'm in, the quickest way to create an external enemy for me is to judge. And so, and I know one of your triggers is traffic and driving.
One of many triggers.
One of many. And so for me, I think about that all the time too. While traffic is on my list and other drivers, I've really changed that because I've made that be my practice. Is that when a driver does something, comes over into my lane, or I try to get over and they are not slowing down so that I can enter traffic. Nothing wrong with it. They're just not slowing down. I just see it as a practice. And so that's been easy for me to flip that. Another one of mine has been if I do a kindness for someone, they don't reciprocate. So that has
big thanks.
Yeah, they don't do the thank you. And like, dude, that's the one. Open the door for somebody, or you hand somebody something or give them something and they don't say thank you. And then my thing starts going with you entitled. What do you think? I'm a servant, I'm a doorman. What is this? Yeah. And I just started running with it. And it took me a while to break that one. But what I was doing essentially is that I was making anyone who didn't show up the way that I thought they should show up, I was making them they were an enemy to me. And I thought it was them, but really it was an internal creation that was going on by my ego. And so once I stopped saying or stopped doing that, I came to the realization that there are no external enemies. And when I gave that up, I gave up being a victim and I gave up being superior. And guess what else happened, Rick? I stopped suffering. Amazing how that happens. So when you think about that, external enemies, and that's not to say that life lines up for you perfectly, or there are people that don't behave in an unconscious way that hurts others, that harms others. I mean, as human beings, man, our track record. Rick.
Yeah, we're not.
I mean, it's not good, man. It's not a good look as human beings on the whole.
Not a good look. Yeah, no, you're right.
So it's not to say that that's not there, but what it's saying is that I'm not going to create any external enemies. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to keep it quite simple, that there are people out there who are behaving consciously. And when you behave consciously, is steeped and rooted in kindness and generosity, compassion, and empathy. And when you're not behaving consciously, and your behavior is unconscious, then that's where all the hateful and harmful behavior, judging and gossiping happens. And I've done both. Rick, I've been doing a practice now, so my behavior is on the whole more conscious. So when you think about there are no external enemies, what does that mean for you?
No, it's just what you said. You said it beautifully, and that's exactly where you need to be. I'm really so happy that you've done that, Keith, because, like you said, some things are always going to be triggers for us. I'm sure it's still a little bit of a trigger, but the difference is you don't react to the trigger the same way when you're doing the practice. It doesn't go away. I'm still triggered by people who I think act stupidly when they're behind the wheel, but I don't have the same kind of reaction to it. Give an example. One of the things that helped me get through my traffic problem, my traffic judgment problem, was I just started to think every morning. When I'd get into the car, I would think, okay, someone right now in Sedona is going to cut me off at that roundabout that I have to make a left at. He's planning it. He's got it all wired up. He's got a big honking vehicle, twice the size of mine. He's going to be zooming through, and he's going to try to ruin my day. Okay, good. So I know it's coming. So I kind of visualized the worst kind of thing that could happen, and then it didn't have the power over me that it usually did. So the idea of externals, it's really important to get that. If you look at the whole circumstance of your life, everything that happens outside of what you actually control has nothing to do with you, right? It's just stuff that happens. It's the throw off, it's the friction, it's the machinations of the universe and interpersonal relations, and things that have only the value that you give them, only the value that you give them. So if you're constantly overvaluing the power of a circumstance outside of you, you are giving up what you really need to keep inside of you to have a successful and personal, powerfully driven life. Give me an example of that, and that is that I don't think that no matter how proficient we get, let's say in meditating or in doing our exercise discipline or being mindful of nutrition, no matter how good we become at that, unless we're able to control our reactions to whatever comes to us, whatever life throws at us, we're always going to be a little bit off stride. And I think I've said before in these podcasts, this is really an important concept. You have to have an inner light within yourself, an inner gyroscope, kind of a little GPS thing that makes you adjust in ways where nothing is going to throw you off or misdirect you. Now, death of a friend or of a relative will do that. Losing your job will do that. Not being able to make the rent payment will do it. I mean, there's a million things, tiny little things as well in that scenario that will throw you off. But the reality is you always control your reaction, right? You always have that choice of what to do. So in your example where you're opening the door for someone and someone isn't grateful, what you do now is okay, they're unconscious, and that's not where they are in their path. You can't take it personally, nor can you get into a situation where you're judging them about if only they were more like me, I wouldn't have to get mad at them.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, you can see how ridiculous that is. And all those things are self-imposed, and they're all benchmarks. They're all markers for continued personal suffering. You got to let all that crap go. The reaction to whatever occurs to you has to be something that is going to allow you to get back to that inner gyroscope, to not knock you off, and to not cause you to judge another person or to judge yourself. That's a tough place to get to. But that's where we should be moving, I think, because that ends our personal suffering. The externals are always going to be there. You're going to have slings, arrows, mud, injustice. Somebody's going to get credit for a project that you pulled off. Someone's not going to know that you were the one who allowed them to succeed where they were failing and they never gave you credit. All that's going to happen in your life. Your kid's not going to be grateful. Your husband or your wife is going to take you for granted, or you think they are. All that is inbuilt. It's a given. It's coming. It's just like the guy who's going to cut me off at the roundabout in Sedona in traffic. Oh, it's coming. It's coming. So you have to decide how you're going to react, not now, but when it occurs. And you have to be able to say, at that moment when it hits you, I have a moment here to decide what I want to do. How am I going to react? If I choose to go through, it shouldn't happen, it's unjust, what's wrong, it's unfair, that's going to cause you suffering because you're wanting something that isn't there for you. You're wanting something out of the universe that's not coming to you. And if you continue to demand that, you're going to continue to suffer. If you let it go, it's a whole different game.
Oh, I totally agree, Rick. Man, you said that so beautifully. It's the desire to want what is occurring right now to be different than it is.
That's right.
In this moment, but it's not different. It is as it is in this moment. That's not to say that you can't affect changing it, but in this moment, it begins with accepting it exactly as it is.
That's right.
And, like right now, there are some amazing things that are happening at the organization that I work with, as well as regarding diversity and inclusion and equity. And that's happening across the country. But for me, if I start from a place of accepting it as it is, appreciating it, I'm not saying liking it, I mean, appreciating with it in terms of like really understanding it, how it is right now. And then from there, informed by kindness, by kindness, empathy, compassion, taking intelligent action to change the situation. But it begins with accepting it right now and not creating external enemies of it. Anytime that you, at least in my life, that I met something with feelings of being wronged, of being treated unfairly, of being hurt, all of those things may have occurred. But if that's my starting point, then I'm just creating that kind of karma for myself. And I am not being my best with addressing the issue. And so, but when I come from a place of, my stepfather is a great example, man, is that I just, for my whole life, saw him as an external enemy. And because of his struggles with alcoholism and with the way that his behavior manifested itself was abusive. But the whole time that I was creating him an external enemy, guess who was experiencing enduring suffering? I was.
That's it.
Man, that's definitely not what I wanted, but I was trapped. You get passed over for a promotion, you get a poor performance evaluation. You get dealt a blow regarding your health. Even in that situation, there's still a choice. Mm-hmm. And what path am I going to take? Regarding the trivial example of me opening the door for someone and someone not saying thank you. Who knows what they got going on in their mind on that day? They could be normally a kind, polite person. They may have got some bad news. Who knows? Or they may be a person who never was taught that, hey, when people do a kindness for you, say thank you. Whatever the reason is, somewhere in that equation, I've got an expectation that is unmet. And so is the problem with the other party, or is the issue with me having an expectation? Standards for myself are different, but my gratitude threshold needs to remain very low. So it takes very little to make me happy. Because when I do that, man, I find beauty in everything, a child's laughter. You and I taking the wrong turn on a ski on a run, and now we got to hike out of it. Like those kinds of things. But in terms of, if I come back to my path, is to be my best, to be kind, and to serve. My path isn't for other people to be kind, to serve. I would love that. I would love that happen.
No, that's great. That's great.
But this is my path.
That's right.
And so when I do that, man, all the external enemies that I've created, they fall away.
And it's an interesting thing. That's a beautiful, beautiful way of putting it, Keith. I love that. But when you make that distinction, my path versus another person's path, when you allow them to have their path and not be affected by whatever quote wrong you think they did you, because that's not how you roll anymore. That's not your path. When you do that, life is so much easier. Oh. I mean, it seems like it would be harder, but it's not. It's not. It feels great not to judge anybody. It's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Or, well, I didn't even think that you could do something like that. Or, how come? Or the point is, it's not something that hurts you. I love this idea the Buddhists have with the double arrow. And the idea is that, let's say there's a circumstance, you lose your job. That's the first arrow. That's the universe sends you this sharp pointed arrowhead that hits right in your heart. Boom. And that's the arrow of losing your job. The second arrow is what you do with that. And right. That second arrow usually is worse than the first.
Oh man.
You go through all kinds of machinations in your head. You make life worse for yourself and for other people by acting out, by being a jerk. And what do you expect? I lost my job. That's just ridiculous. It's like saying, okay, I burned my hand and now I think I'll cut it off.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just compound it. I'll just close with this, and then I'll let you have some closing remarks. And that is, man, for me, regarding external enemies, it's, people look at the way that I used to deal with situations in terms of getting upset, enemy out of the smallest thing. Somebody showed up late. They've got my ire, and they become an external enemy. Someone didn't show up, they're an external enemy. Whatever the case may be, man, it just caused incredible suffering. But when I started to someone come in late, meet them where they were, and like I may say something like, "Hey, listen, next time, like we start class at 7, but I'm saying it in a completely different way. Is there anything I could do to help, with that? Or I hope you're okay, because normally you're on time. But let's say the person is never on time. Then I just accept. I create the space where they show up late, without any kind of judgment. But when I've dealt with life in a peaceful way, Rick, no one's ever called me a sucker. Like, what? But when I dealt with it the other way, like, man, this guy's always like amped up, everything. Like he takes everything from 1 to 10,000 in a heartbeat, and all of this. When I would give feedback before, my feedback was pointed and direct. There's another way to give feedback, man. You can do feedback. You can still be straight in your conversation, but you can deliver it in a kind, considerate way. And so again, this new path I'm on, I've never been called a sucker, and I'm getting more done, and I'm a whole lot more peaceful doing it, man. So, and that's because there are no external enemies for me. You want to close this out?
Well, I learned from you. That's a great example. Anyone who knows you can see that you live that. You're not just lecturing about an abstract concept. You're talking about your life, and you have firsthand knowledge of the difference between being someone who was on a different path, who was unconscious, and someone now who's following the path of heart and the path of consciousness and kindness, gratitude, dispassion about outcome. It's a beautiful thing, Keith, and I'm glad I got to see the before and after.
Dude, you've been a part. You've been a key figure in making and helping or bringing about and after. So otherwise, I'd be trapped in the before, man. So thank you for being a part of the after. And
it's all you, man. It's all you.
And we're just getting cooking. I mean, it's not even halftime right now. I mean, we're like the Phoenix Suns, man. I mean, we're rolling, man. We're just finding
unstoppable.
We're getting better every day, man. We're getting better every day. That's
love
it.
that idea.
So we're not peaking yet, Rick, man. We're just getting better every day. Kaizen.
That's it. Kaizen, buddy.
That's it. I love you, Rick.
I love you, Keith. Hey, great show. Thanks. I'm going to replay this. I liked a lot of the stuff you said a lot.
Oh,
I'm going to have to
likewise.
give it some thought here. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Rick. I love you.
I love you. Bye-bye.